Okay, just let me know when we're on.
No problem.
Are we there? Okay. Hello, good evening, and good afternoon, wherever it may be to you, us, everybody. Much respect, and welcome to another edition of Gran Torino. And as the title suggests, I am joined tonight with Stable Genius, and we will be dropping bombs on Bono. Short and simple, short and simple solution to that. We to give you some background in Gran Torino, we we conducted an interview with Mr. Charles Ortel and Dr. Corsi, and it was during the course of that conversation that Stable Genius was inspired to go on her own research and put together this little special report of the sauce and her findings on what she found in her research. Stable, good evening or good afternoon
Good
to you
evening.
in your place. How are you this afternoon? You keeping well?
I am excellent, and thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor.
Not at all. It's
And
my honour. You do the sterling work. I am just the facilitator.
we'll facilitate away, sir.
Thank you. And just touch in with live chat. Live chat. I can see the room starting to fill up. Thank you very much for joining the Summer Breeze. James Collins, AZAP, Rocky Sanchez again. Welcome back. Karen Parnham, hello to you. Karen says hello to you as well, Stable, as do all the others.
Hi,
PC Dog.
Karen.
Freeboard says hello. T Black, Debbie Hall, how you doing? Everybody on board. The the long and short of this inspiration is during the conversation between Dr. Corsi and Mr. Ortel, there was a kind of a throwaway remark, and I'm guessing it just kind of struck in your graw, Stable. Can you extrapolate on that a
Yeah,
little bit for us?
sure. And I guess just so I'm able to see what's going on YouTube and live chat. If you can kind of let me know or queue up the presentation because I think it'll flow pretty well.
Yeah, of course.
Um, yeah, absolutely. But what Dr. Ortel talked about, he brought up a magazine article from Fortune magazine, and in it and it talks about there's a throwaway line that says it's just blacks dying, and it definitely did stick in my craw because anyone dying is unfortunate, and when we get into kind of the meat of what we're going to talk about, it really just shows sort of how insidious all of this is in the name of charity, and then we'll tie it together with QAnon, which is why a lot of people are here.
Indeed. We'll just allow the room to fill a little bit more up. We've got 30 members.
Sure.
I know a few more people will be joining us along presently, and hopefully some of the moderators will jump in and
No worries.
join in with the live chat. Live chat. English Patriot saying hello again. Hiya, brother. Thank you very much for joining us back again. Excuse me. Sorry.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of love. No problem. You're getting a lot of love for doing two shows in a row today.
Yeah. Well, we seem to be on a roll, as they say, but it's important to get this sauce out. And we've been not that we've been talking about this, but you've been putting this together for quite some time, and it was just essentially getting a matter of the timing down. And we worked out. We've had a few conversations, but I will say on my behalf that I am so glad that this is not my first time presenting this information again, because when Stable and I first went through this, my jaw was on the floor again, and I was like a I don't know 4 or 5 year old. Wow, wow, oh my God, wow. that's all
Well,
I
you know
kept
that you
saying.
know that's sort of that's the kind of mark of decent research. So it has been a lot of time, a lot of hours put into it, and I hope that the team in YouTube gets a chance to kind of look at all of it and hopefully help to validate some of the things that I found and even bring us some more information so that we can expand on what we started. But it is a wow, and if you don't get a wow reaction, not because it's new news, but just because of how interesting it is and how the world works, then I think maybe you don't have a pulse. So
Absolutely.
wows are good.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave it on the web browser. With that, I'll go
Okay.
one more touch in. Sorry, one more touch in with the live chat, guys. We want that we're not going to be ignoring you and stuff like that. I'm just going to let it flow, and I'm just going to let Stable take us through bit by bit, And with that, Stable, I'm going to transition over to the opening page of your PDF.
Sure thing.
You should see that
Excellent.
presently, and then I will follow. Just remember, there's a slight 10-second lag to the
Delay.
stream. Yeah,
Absolutely. I can deal with the delay. And again,
brilliant.
thank you. It's a real honor to even be here. So I'm a fan of the show and
Well,
a
thank you
fan
very
of your
much.
work. And
Stop it with your
absolutely,
stop it with your flattery. It'll get you everywhere.
it'll get you absolutely everywhere, right? Flies, you can get more flies with honey, they say. Um, and that's a big part of what my goal is. So we've had a chance to work together on our CBTS underscore stream and on our 24-hour live chat. So it's really a pleasure to see all the researchers and anons working together, and then branching off and doing things that are of passion and of matter to them. And I know how important Ireland is to you. It's a part of my own heritage, and so hopefully we'll be able to help the people of Ireland wake up, as well as helping the whole world.
Yeah, indeed. To me, it's just a patriot movement. It's not that we're diverging or separating from each other. We're trying to disseminate as much information as we can to uh,
Yep.
to hear the roar, the booms throughout the world. We just need to spread the message.
Boom. And Marianne Mack, I see you. Thank you so much. Love you, and appreciate all the time that you all spend with us. And you certainly help to make the CBTS process better, and just the whole crowdsourcing concept has really bloomed. So really appreciate everybody, and all
Okay,
the feedback.
okay, Stable. Let's get into it.
Okie dokie. So we kind of talked about the first slide, so I think I'd be willing to forego that one. And it'll get us to the next, which is a shameless plug for the Internet Bill of Rights. So when I actually attempted to watch your presentation with Dr. Corsi and with Charles Ortel, I was greeted by this lovely warning, which is not something that a typical person is used to seeing, right? And so I try, whenever I'm looking at something, I try to analyze immediately what it means and distill it to the least common denominator. And the least common denominator I got about the censorship that you're experiencing and that I'm experiencing is that Google doesn't let you be anonymous, and that you will be tracked by Google and by YouTube. And if you haven't felt it, it's coming, but you can be a part of the solution. The Internet Bill of Rights is coming. It's at least coming in America, but it's something that all over the world we need to strive and fight for. So just don't forget that you do have rights. And at least if you are from the United States, we are working, and we have a Discord that's dedicated to developing an Internet Bill of Rights. And tweet it, and Facebook, and all of your social media. Don't forget that hashtag. So moving along to the next slide, hopefully what you'll learn at the end of this conversation is a little bit more about Ranbaxy, which was the organization that Charles Ortel discussed on that call that I was so inspired by. You'll understand a little bit about the connection between non-governmental organizations, and you will also learn a little bit about my personal QD code process, and every researcher is different. And then finally, we will talk about, and throughout, we'll talk about the connection to the Irish people and to the country of Ireland. So we can go to the next slide whenever you're ready, sir.
And we're there now.
Okay. So, and as you said, Gran Torino, my inspiration was your actual talk with Dr. Jerome Corsi and Charles Ortel. And for those who haven't watched it, please go back and watch it. It's a seminal work, two great giants in the field of research. And if you want to fast forward to the section that kind of got my ears perked, it was it was 51 minutes and 26 seconds into the presentation. And Charles was talking about an article that was released in Fortune magazine called Dirty Medicine. And in the article, they were discussing really dirty medicine, and they were tying, Dr. Corsi and Charles were tying it together to the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Global Initiative, and the HIV/AIDS Initiative, and how all of these charities were not registered, they are not in fact real, and ultimately they may be slush funds. But what we find out in the Dirty Medicine article is that not only are these organizations problematic, but that the drugs themselves are quite dangerous, and they were killing people in Africa, the very people that they were intended to help. And so what you see at the bottom left-hand corner of the presentation is number 8. It's number 8 in the article, and the title of that section of the article is called "It's Just Blacks Dying." And when you see anytime that you see a word sauce in the presentation, it's actually a citation to a specific article. So I believe, GT, you are going to be able to post the links or the page with all of the links to the articles so that everyone can help fact check us. You still there, GT?
My apologies.
No worries.
I was working on a mute button here on my new microphone. But as I said, I just clicked the link on the PDF, and that directs me straight to the source or the article that you correlate there, that I have it brought up here on the screen. You can read that at your own leisure, but again, it's just part of the source that Stable is tying in together, just so you know how that the PDF operates.
Excellent. Thank you.
And we're back to your presentation.
Wonderful. So that'll get us now, we should be, or if we can, to the slide where it's showing Ranbaxy.
Yep, I have that there
And
now.
yep, so this is just a snapshot from the Wikipedia page that discusses the organization. So it's Ranbaxy Pharmaceuticals. It has been acquired by Sun Pharmaceuticals. They're both two very large Indian pharmaceutical companies, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And we show the CEO and their connection actually to the Japanese pharmaceutical giant Daiichi Sankyo. So what you see here is in the presentation are actually the excerpts from the article itself, right? And I put red boxes. This is just my methodology. I'm putting the red boxes around the things that really stood out for me and potentially should stand out for you. And it's that Ranbaxy itself, as an organization, was approved by the FDA to act and operate in the United States and distribute drugs elsewhere. And the World Health Organization restored the company's ARVs even after it had been found to have what you would call dirty medicine, so compromised and tainted and or ineffective and inactive medication. And the blue lettering this is my sort of decode here, but when you tie it together, these are the very drugs that were being used by the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative. And the World Health Organization and the Food and Drug Administration looked the other way, right? They looked the other way, even though they knew there was bad data and bad drugs. And so again, another snippet right below that is related to what the Ranbaxy leadership was saying that Fortune magazine kind of called out in their article. They knew the drugs weren't good. They knew that they were high impurities. They knew it degraded easily. And more important, they knew it would be useless for the poorest patients in sub-Saharan Africa. So if your goal is actually to treat HIV/AIDS, it's really important that from the perspective of dealing with the viral nature of the condition, that you help to prevent all of that from happening. So it's really important that the drugs are actually working, and knowingly giving someone drugs that don't work is fraud from the financial perspective, but it's also really quite evil from the perspective of healthcare and trying to make people feel well. And Ranbaxy's executives, as they talk about in the magazine, they just didn't care, right? And this is the part where it came, where the executive said, "Who cares? It's just blacks dying," right? And so we'll pause here and think about, well, who cares? What does that matter? India, as a country, has built up itself as a juggernaut in the drug business, and in fact, Indian pharmaceutical industry supplies 40% of the over-the-counter and generic prescription drugs in the United States. Okay,
Take
and
that
then I
in.
cited the article.
Take that in, people. Say that again, Stable.
Yeah, so India's pharmaceutical industry supplies 40% of the over-the-counter and generic drugs in the United States. So the same thing that's happening to the people in Africa from Ranbaxy, now Sun Pharmaceuticals, can happen to you. If you take an over-the-counter drug, you can go back and trace the what they call the provenance of that drug, and you can find out where it's manufactured. And dollars to donuts, a little under half of that amount is going to be coming from India. Another thing that I thought about was, Q, and we're going to get to Q, but Q often talks about, at least in the United States, and it's not the same in Ireland because you don't have the same sort of ethnic mix that we have here.
Yeah.
But the Democrat Party, right, or the left, and it's not about left or right. I just want to kind of talk about the context of my blue notation is that the Democrat Party has held itself as the party that cares about Black people. But you can't care about Black people if you know that it's just Blacks dying because you're giving them faulty medication on
Exactly.
purpose.
Oh, exactly, stable. Well pointed out.
On purpose. Okay, GT, we can go to the next. And I see Summer Bree saying, "Oh my God, 40%." Yeah, that's just the beginning. So when we go to the proofs again, because don't take my word for it, don't take anybody's word for it.
Yeah.
Certainly trust but verify. I'm showing you three different pieces of paper. So the first is from the Office of Economics from the U.S. International Trade Commission. The second is from the Department of Justice, and then the third is from the New York Times. So even fake news can be right every once in a while. And so in the U.S. International Trade Commission article, which is the one at the bottom left of the screen, they had evaluated the emergence of India's pharmaceutical industry and what it meant to the United States generic drug market. And it's a longish article, but I think I tried to pull out the summary that matters. And so number one, the Indian majors are offsetting losses that they're having elsewhere and shifting their attention to Western Europe, which is where Ireland is going to come in. Ranbaxy is a major source of generic drugs. Indian companies have spent millions of dollars filing ANDAs. This is what helps to make a drug a generic product for people with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to gain exclusive production rights for many drugs losing their patent protection in the United States. So what that means is that, say, a drug like, Viagra, that's a well-known name, right? That's a brand name. Well, the United States patented drugs are allowed to exclusively operate. That means that no one else, even if you can figure out how the drug works, no one else is allowed to produce a drug that has the same chemical components as your drug for at least 10 years. And that's called exclusivity. And once that exclusivity period is over, then a lot of generic drug manufacturers have back engineered the contents and the composition of the drug, and now they want to enter the market and flood it with lower cost versions of that drug, and that's what a generic product is.
We had the whole experience of, due to Pfizer being based down in Cork here in the Republic of Ireland. We were well aware of the 10 year period in between, because it was seen as a real strength and a real investment for Ireland. That was the message.
Oh wow.
If I remember it back, because they had that exclusivity in it, and the patent was locked down for a number of years. We weren't sure that it was a decade, but you see, as soon as that copyright more or less was finished, or that lockdown was finished, in it, third party versions of that drug just took off through the roof.
Wow. And so the nation of Ireland sort of took a chance with Pfizer because they knew that at least for 10 years that the drugs that Pfizer was producing could reliably be produced in Ireland. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm not sure that was the thinking, but I'm sure it was a contributory factor, because there would have been known that the patents would have been locked down for quite a period of time, and such a substantial investment in chemical plant, the big plant that's down there.
Right.
They wanted a return on that investment at least, and a cheap corporate tax rate.
And the cheap corporate tax rate, because it always comes back to the money.
5 by 5.
5 by 5. And what's stunning, if you look at this actual work paper, right? So they talk about the fact that these Indian companies have spent millions of dollars to get the production rights after the American companies have lost their exclusivity. And their final thesis is that this continued price competition in the U.S. market will mean cheaper prices for generic drugs and greater choice for U.S. consumers. It sounds so warm and fuzzy, right? Greater choice.
Yeah, it's all for you. It's for you and
right,
your benefit.
My God, even though they understood that the Ranbaxy had a horrible reputation from a safety and efficacy perspective, I don't really think choosing crappy, ineffective, and even dangerous drugs is a choice that anyone wants to make, even if it's cheaper.
100%.
Which gets us to the article from the New York Times that's sitting on top of the DOJ announcement. And so, again, all of the sauce is there. So when you guys get a chance, go back through, peruse all the articles, and certainly give us feedback if you think that we missed anything or if you want to add something to this. But in 2013, Ranbaxy pled guilty and agreed to pay $500 million to resolve a false claims allegation and other violations and false statements to the Food and Drug Administration. And so this was actually the largest the largest fine and penalty paid by a drug manufacturer in the history of the United States. And I don't know about you, but 500 million, $1 million is a lot, right? So
Yeah.
500 million is stunning. And that's money that they had in reserve to pay for this, if you think about it. Because they didn't go out of business immediately. But they were charged with it's the largest drug safety settlement to date with a generic drug manufacturer. They pled guilty to felony charges related to the manufacture and distribution of adulterated drugs. So again, putting it together, this is May 13, 2013.
Yeah.
When Ranbaxy, when that article was written, it was really evaluating what had gone on with and what Dr. Corsi and Charles Ortel were discussing was the adulterated drugs that were being distributed in Africa through the Clinton Global Initiative. This is all around the same time. So this was known and rather nefarious.
Okay, do you want me to slide down?
Yes, sir. And Marion Mack, yes, absolutely. So she says on YouTube, so think how many billions they had. Wow. Yeah. Think about how many billions that they have. So now let's talk about the proofs of Ranbaxy in Ireland. So Sun, the organization Sun Pharmaceuticals, merged with Ranbaxy in 2014 and 2015 for a jaw-dropping $4 billion with a B dollars.
$4 billion
with a B. And there had actually been a Ranbaxy plant in Ireland and Cashel, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
That's correct. Well done.
There you go. So the plant had been open for 30 years and it closed in 2016. So the people of Ireland, and we're going to get into some more factoids here, but the people of Ireland have been affected not only by the quality of what was coming out of Ranbaxy, but also by the loss of jobs when the plant closed.
Just want to do a quick mic check there for the live chat. They said I was coming a little bit in behind you there. How's that, guys? Go ahead, Stable.
Okie dokie. So we can go to the next slide. So I'm sure that you're asking, like, well, where's the Q and what does this have to do with Q, right? So I'm going to share a little bit about the way that I process information and do my decodes. And I certainly would be open to some feedback or some questions from the YouTube chat when we get to the end of the presentation, because we built some time for that.
Brilliant.
So we can go correct to the next slide, sir, with the 3-Phos Pharma. So I'm looking at a picture of 4 different Q posts. This is what it looks like when Q is communicating. And I'm just assuming that not everyone knows who Q is that watches your show, so this is what it looks like. And I've taken, little screenshots of the Q posts that were particularly relevant to this conversation. So when I was listening to the talk with Dr. Corsi and Charles Ortel in Gran Torino, my mind was immediately racing to, hey, I've heard these words, and I remember Q talking about this, and specifically talking about the role of Big Pharma. And so I simply searched for all of the posts that had the word PHARMA, and I looked for all 3 spellings. And in the month of February, there were 3 Q posts that specifically talked about pharma, and in the month of December, there was 1. And the overarching point amongst all of these posts is, what happens if you find out that the pharmaceutical industry was actually that they created the diseases, and specifically potentially AIDS. Wow. And what if the purpose of these diseases was strictly to manage population control? And what happens when you find out, or if you find out, that there were cures that were withheld for these diseases? And what happens when you find out, or if you find out, that the drugs were in fact used as a weapon? And the drugs, at least in the case of Ranbaxy, right, were used as a weapon because they were knowingly giving bad product to people. that wouldn't cure them or help them or even manage their disease.
Unbelievable.
And then it is unbelievable. It's heartbreaking. And Q talks about, that there were billions of dollars raised for cures. And this is when we get into the NGO and the charity connection. Again, tying it all back to what you guys were talking about in your talk a little bit over a month ago with Dr. Corsi and Charles Ortel, which is where the Clinton Foundation comes in, which is where the Red Cross comes in, and which is where the government entities come in. And the one thing that Q keeps bringing up is that these people, they say these people are sick, right? And they say that they think that regular people like you and I are sheep. And so, what about the billions that were provided to cure the development of the disease? Well, the Clinton Foundation, BONO, the Bill and Belinda Gates Foundation, all of these organizations have just processed billions and billions of dollars. And you would think, man, if I had $1 billion and I gave it away to, if I had $1 billion, let's just do the math, and there was a country that had, 100 people, is there any reason that those people would still be poor?
Not at all.
Not at all. And yet, for all of the billions of dollars, what's happened? The people are still poor. They've still got AIDS. The AIDS isn't cured, and it's coming right out of your pocket. Go ahead, GT.
No, I'm just running in with live chat, and it might have been just a sound thing that you might have thought I was interrupting. No, but I have my hand over my mouth here to stop my jaw dropping again. Every time, second time around again. And I just with touch with live chat just before you touch on. Just to explain the cue board for any new guys, I see a couple of new people in the live chat tuning in live. This is the cue board. Sure. This is how it's presented on the channel boards. It's military-esque in its how would you say, in its explanation, but you have to decipher it, and there's more, there's hidden meanings, and there's breadcrumbs left everything way. There's all manner, and it's too long to go into, but this is where we get our cue from.
Yeah, and my point, right, is if you look at, if you can zoom in on that 777 post, so, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to do this, and you don't have to try to worry about the things you don't understand. You can just zone in on the things that you do understand. And so in this particular case, I was looking at the question of why was Big Pharma essential, right? And, there's other things that are unrelated, so I won't talk about the MK Ultra mind control, but Big Pharma looks the other way when Indian manufacturers make obviously tainted and ineffective drugs for the U.S. and global market. Mm-hmm. And again, it goes back to the whole idea of using drugs and using these diseases for population control. So we'll go on to the next, if you don't mind.
Sure thing.
Yep. So what you see here is sort of kind of how I put it all together. So after I'd watched the show, I said, hey, GT, I've got this for you. This is kind of how I process all the information. So I take the article that Charles Ortel brought to everyone's attention. I read it. And when I'm reading, I actively read. So the little square boxes, those red boxes are for me. That's how I'm picking out the points that I believe are important. And then the blue text is sort of my distillation of what I think those things mean. Then I go validate the details, right? So I shared with you some of the articles that came from, whether it was the New York Times or actual governmental sources, the Department of Justice. I'm going to validate whether or not the things that are in the article are factual and can be at least confirmed by 2 or 3 more different and disparate sources. Then I document my thoughts on the documentation. So, I've got red underline and highlights and all sorts of things. And if you actually see my little personal set of treasure trove of notes, there's all sorts of, if I feel something, I write what I feel in the comments, and I just try to put it all together. And then I document my thoughts on the relevant post. So like I said, after listening to the talk and reading the article, I said, hey, I've known about these things for a long time, and I know that Q's discussed these topics on many occasions, and I look for those specific keywords. And then when I find those specific posts with those keywords, I cut and paste them, and I write on them, and I do the same thing that I did to the article. And then, lickety splickety wham bam, I put all of those images together. And there's multiple programs that you can use to do this. I'm not fancy, and I'm mostly on mobile. So I use Acrobat, I use Microsoft Word, I'm using, the pictures app in my phone, and I'm able to combine the images. And then this is actually what I sent to Gran Torino, after I was so inspired by the show. And then, like I said, you share it with the internets, right? So you share it with the world because you want to get some validation and you want to find out, hey, am I on the right track? Am I on the wrong
Yes.
track? And people will tell you if you've got it dead wrong, and they'll tell you if they think that you've got it right, or they might give you some more clues.
But
Um,
that's the whole point of hypothesizing is you throw your argument out so that you can get some feedback.
exactly, exactly. And we want, I don't think that anybody has all of the answers, but I need, in order to know whether or not I'm on the right track, I definitely need to be questioned, and
Hmm.
I need to be able to um, validate my thoughts and validate my argument. And that's pretty much what I like about Q, is that future proves past, and so you can go back and say, hey, how many times has what Q said come to fruition, or at least been actively true? The other thing that I like about Q is that they talk about you have everything that you need, and this is true. We have everything that we need, right? Everything that I'm talking to you about is not new. In fact, it's quite old. So these articles are from 2013, 2012, 2010. This is old information. We just forgot to play the game. We forgot to shine the light on this sort of corruption, and we just move on with our lives as opposed to putting it together and saying, you know what, this really is inappropriate. It's amoral.
Some might say to you, "Oh, but who has time to do all of this? You know, who we've got so busy in our lives, and that's what the news is there for. And let's just take a snapshot of the headline, and everybody else seems to come to the same consensus. So, yep, that's my thought. I'll go with that. That's the way we've been.
Right, and that's the point, right? That's the point. That's why they want you so busy. That's why they want you on drugs. That's why they want you confused. That's why we have the Kardashians,
Yeah,
right? They definitely don't want you to have the time, energy, or the effort, and you don't have to do it all. But the point is that you can do it. That you are smart enough. That you have a memory, and if you chose to, with 15 or 20 clicks and maybe less than an hour, you too could decode these Q posts or decode any article for that matter.
I'd say the buzz on the left is usually check your privilege, no matter what that is. But it'd be check your privilege. But I would say to them, well, check your epistemology. How do you know what you know?
Oh, I like that. Yes. Check your epistemology. And why do you know what you know? And why do you believe what you believe?
Yes, exactly.
Um, yeah. And thank you to all the people in live chat. Yeah, we've had this information and the pieces are just coming together. And we don't have to feel bad about it. It's just that, we can say that not on our watch. We can say that enough is enough and that we are going to work together across the world, right? Because we've talked about India, we're talking about Ireland, we're talking about the United States, we're talking about sub-Saharan Africa. This is a global issue. And the whole world's going to have to, all the plebeians of the planet are going to have to work together, to speak truth to power and to try to force out some of these really bad actors.
Yeah, it's not like we're reassessing or reassigning ourselves to be instant fact checkers or instant knowledges or purveyors of knowledge. We've,
Mm.
myself and Stable and a blessed few others, have been given a privileged position where we're on point or we're on notice that these events are happening throughout the world, and we've formulated and come to the conclusion with other like-minded people that the majority seems to swing. Yet this is real, this is happening, and we need to facilitate it. But it's only the very small machinations in the President Trump's administration that are going through this. We have to bypass the mainstream. We have to push this out. You decipher whether you think it's real or not. But this is the presentation, and it's a fantastic presentation that Stable gives us. You'll have the link to the PDF, and you'll be able to branch off and confirm yourself whether you agree with Stable or not. Take it away, Stable.
Excellent. So, in terms of the rest of the process, right? So you share it, and then you monitor the news. And we're going to get into that shortly. But you keep monitoring the news because there's more and more information that's coming to light, and there's more and more information that's already been out there that maybe you just weren't aware of. And then you go back through and you reread the crumbs. And so the crumbs is what we're talking about as what Q puts out. So we call those drops. So each and every one of those 693, 777, 252, that's called a Q drop, like an Intel drop. And then Q refers to, reread the crumbs. So these crumbs are being dropped a little bit like Hansel and Gretel, right? And they drop crumbs along the way so they could find their way back home. Well, Q is dropping crumbs along the way so that we can find our way back to the freedom that I think all of us really want to enjoy. And then you wash, rinse, and repeat. So you just keep going through the process, and we can move on. So after I had actually given GT my original decode, some other things had occurred, and I wanted to reread some more crumbs, and I ran into these lovely gentlemen, Mr. Soros and Mr. Rothschild, and obviously Photoshop pictures. So please, I know that that's not a real picture, but it was a picture that Q.
It puts them together in the same room. That's all we need.
Exactly. And it was a picture that Q actually had included in one of the drops that occurred in 2018. But I wanted to really think about honing in on. So we just talked about the pharma connection, right? Now let's talk about the Soros NGO connection. And so when I looked at, there are many, many posts that deal with Soros, but I found 5 that I thought were relevant. Spanning from November of 2000. Well, actually, the farthest back is the October 2017. And that was where they talk about the D's being the Democrats in the United States, the second or the largest or second largest political party. They can't lose control over the black population. They talk about false black leaders who are corrupt and paid off, and that they keep the black population poor and in need. And it talks about, well, what happens if the truth of Haiti is released? And my question is, what about the truth of Africa being released as well? Mm-hmm. And that's post number 9. That was one of the earlier posts that occurred. In post 142, which came in November of 2017, this is where we introduce, or where Q introduces Soros. And at what age was George Soros, and what's George Soros' family history? And not super relevant here, but there's definitely, there have been multiple videos that people have seen from George Soros talking about on 60 Minutes how he was actually adopted and really technically worked as a Nazi collaborator, outing other Jewish people in Nazi Germany. And then they talk about in the post right below it that you're looking at, it says, what family did George Soros replace? What's the why? And then in post 299 from December, it again starts to talk about, well, what's Soros? What's his purpose? And he controls the organizations of people. And in blue, I wrote, those organizations of people are NGOs, or non-governmental organizations. And part of the purpose of the organizations of people, of these non-governmental organizations, or NGOs from now on, is to divide and brainwash people. It is to operate slush funds, right? So slush funds being, you've got these large foundations, they're processing billions of dollars, but none of that money is actually going towards a cause because it's going in the pockets of the people behind the foundation. And then finally in post 275, again, which is an earlier post, Soros controls the organizations of people, right? So he's the head of the NGO arm of this pyramid that we're working against. And that Gran Torino and I, and that you here in the YouTube chat, and the Anons around the world are working to bring down. And so again, I just monitor the news, future proofs past. I reread the crumbs. I do some more research, and again, I wash, rinse, and repeat. And it's a fabulous learning cycle. And I think the great thing about Q, and I think that this would be something that I challenge anyone in the YouTube world to think about, is the people that tell you not to look over here, the people that tell you not to learn, the people that tell you you're not allowed to read emails, those are the people that you can't trust. What I think is interesting about Q is that he's actually just asking a lot of questions, so it's the Socratic method, but he's making people do more reading than they've probably done since they were in college, if they went to college at all.
100%, yeah.
And don't you feel like you're learning more every day, Gran Torino?
Every day. I've learned so much. I never did anything like this at school. Just every day is research driven.
And don't you feel like your brain is getting smarter, and that you can read the comms, and that when a new Q drop comes out?
I wouldn't say smarter, because people that know me wouldn't accuse me of that. But I've definitely expanded my thinking, and I've definitely I've allowed possibilities to enter, and I've given myself a chance to, as I'd say, check my epistemology, to work it out, and then wash, rinse, and repeat. I remember at the very start of this, and I don't want to just drag on too quick, but at the very start of this, I wasn't getting any sleep. I was doing 12 to 13 hours a day, days, trying to keep up with all of this. but eventually you come to master what you need to discern from it.
You know, no sleep till Gitmo, as I say. And
Very good.
Freebird said that their brain hurts. So yeah, it definitely it's tiring, but it's also invigorating. And
Yeah.
this really is the work of the citizenry, right? So we can go to the next slide, but to be a member of a democracy or of a republic, as we are in the United States, it's actually something that takes work, and it's not something that you can sit on the couch and do, and it's certainly not something that you can trust a politician to do 1,000 miles away from where you're sitting. So now we're going to get into the proofs.
Hang on,
No
sorry,
worries.
chicken. Yeah, I don't believe it.
That's okay.
It's
That's okay.
it's not loading up here. Let me see if I can re-download it again. I had it
That's
already.
okay.
Typical, isn't it?
That's okay. Well, listen, I can still read while you're looking.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Because we also have people who aren't able to watch, right? So
Yeah.
we're going to get into now the proofs. So we talked about the cues, and now we're going to try to prove some of these things. And specifically, we'll be looking into the One Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the United Nations, the Red Cross, and tying it together with George Soros and his dastardly NGOs. So the One Foundation, and everything that I'm giving to you from the websites of the organizations. It's not hearsay. This is how these organizations talk about themselves. And so on their webpage, it says that One originated in conversations between Bill Gates and Bono in the early 2000s about the need to better inform Americans about extreme poverty around the world. Together with Melinda Gates, Bob Schreiber, George Soros, Ed Scott, Bob Geldof, and Jamie Drummond, they created an anti-poverty advocacy organization known as DATA that focused on deploying celebrities and other influential individuals to urge world leaders to take action on specific development issues. Just a moment, okay. And so DATA joined together to form One, and its actual goal is to create a political constituency for development, and particularly focusing on the UN Millennium Development Goals. So we're just going to, so we've tied together in just in 1 second, right? Bill Gates, Bono, George Soros, the UN, and the One Foundation. And that's just the beginning.
Just coming up to it now.
So I'm going to.
I got it there, back
Okay,
there.
no problem. Yay! As they say, patience is a kingly virtue.
Indeed. Let me just fix the transition. Carry
Yep,
on.
there you go. And we'll actually go to the next because I know that we're getting pretty close to our time.
Exactly. Give me one
So
minute.
talking about the Irish connection. So obviously the most Irish connection I can bring you first is just Bono. He may be your most famous export. And what's fascinating, and again, I'm not telling you anything that isn't already known. I'm just bringing it together in this format. In 2010, One gave almost only 1% of all the money it had earned towards HIV/AIDS and poverty. So specifically, they gave £118,000, presumably to the actual needs of the foundation, and they spent £5 million on salaries.
Wow. Oh, sorry.
And
I've done it again.
No, it's okay. A wow is good. You have a pulse. You have a heart. And then in 2011, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS and Malaria, their scam was investigated. And what they found was that 2/3 of the money that was given was stolen or misused. And so for those that might be kind of walking around and just listening, I'm showing there's 3 screenshots up here. So we've got a picture of Bono with his famous blue glasses and Bill Gates. Then there's actually a screenshot from an article from the Daily Mail that discusses the $28 billion health fund that was being investigated for fraud. And then finally, another article from the Daily Mail back in September of 2010 with a picture of Bono and the now disgraced Sarkozy, former president of France, again being investigated for the over 1% of funds given to charity. So when you think about One, think 1%.
And,
Because that's just about what they gave.
And all you Q buffs over here, check out the handshake too. That's all we need to say. Keep going there, Stable.
So we'll go to the next slide. So remember, we said that the part of the reason that One existed was to push the UN development goals. Well, the way that it works, and I looked up Irish Aid, and it's the I can't read Irish, so I don't know if you can,
Yeah,
GT, but can you read
pronounce
it?
reading it, it's one thing. Pronouncing it's another thing. But the Irish Aid, it's on rock. No, I'm not even going to try. Department of Foreign Affairs and
Okay,
Trade, but it is an official website.
okay. And they describe what the UN Millennium Development Goals are because Irish Aid is actually dedicated to those goals as well. And so they have 8 internationally agreed goals and targets to reduce global poverty in 189 countries, including Ireland. And Ireland, as a country, whether or not you agreed to it as a citizen, have agreed to achieve these UN goals, supposedly on the needs of the poor people and poor communities. So we'll go to the next slide. So, Irish Aid, in their annual report from 2013, talks specifically about their NGO partners. Again, we're tying it all together here. So, when I think about NGOs, again, Soros is the head of the NGOs. And who are NGOs? They're essentially unelected bureaucrats.
None.
And what does Irish Aid say about these about their partnership with NGOs? They say that it is a vital component of a healthy democracy. And how is that possible? Did you vote for any of these people?
Negative.
Negative. And the thing that you can also, one of the things I want people to understand is when you're reading propaganda or listening to it, you can tell because it comes in these bite-sized little chunks and it sounds all good, but when you ask the question, but why, you can't answer it with anything logical. So why is an NGO partner necessary for a vital democracy? And I'll just leave that out there. And I
Right.
would certainly be interested in the live chat's thoughts on why they might be useful. And they say that they contribute to improving governance and human rights. So your own government can't be trusted to do that. The people of Ireland can't be trusted to do that. The people of America can't be trusted to do that. We need to hire George Soros, who gave up his own people to the Nazis, to help us figure out a way to manage human rights. That's what that means.
I love the way you phrased that. Thank you. Keep going. God bless your
I just
First
get so
Amendment.
irritated.
God
God
bless
bless
your
you.
First Amendment, by the way.
Oh, that's right, because you don't have it, but I'm in the States, so you can't catch me. Let's see. So let's talk about the numbers. Again, this is from their annual report. So Irish Aid and the people of Ireland gave 96 million euros to HIV, health, and AIDS. And then in terms of the bilateral channel of delivery, Irish Aid provided 165 and some change million euros to NGOs and civil societies to administer those funds. So that is a huge chunk of change. And I don't know, again, if when you were paying your taxes, you understood that that money was going towards that. And I don't know if you've ever received any kind of report on at least one person whose life you've helped to change in Africa and some of the other nations where it's supposed to be going.
And then when you
I
consider
doubt that you'll get anything.
when you consider the previous slide and one's tribulations and only given a certain percentage, and then the rest
Yep.
in remunerations and wages. God bless you, Bono. God bless you, sir.
Right. Thanks for all that you do, because for all this money that's been raised, and this was back in 2013. Don't you think that if you had 96 wait, 9 yeah, $96 million. If you gave $96 million to any group of people, do you think they'd be poor anymore?
Negative. Oh, but
It's
you
just
see, we've got overheads. We've got getting the stuff out there, but you're giving them defective drugs as well.
you're given defective drugs, and I guess you're paying for people to get Louis Vuitton and some really expensive bags, because $5 million in salary sounds like a chunk of change as well.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next page, because we've talked about NGO partners, we've talked about one. Now let's talk about the Red Cross, and the Irish Red Cross in particular. So what we have are 2 different articles. The first article was on January 14th, 2010. And in it, they're talking about Noah Wardick, who was the head of the International Department of the Irish Red Cross. And he was petitioning the people of Ireland to give of their money to help the people in Haiti who had been recently devastated by the earthquake. And if you will recall, the Clinton Foundation stepped up to be the distributor of funds and to ensure that the Haitian people could benefit from the largesse of the world. Now, fast forward to November 15th, 2010, and it looks like Mr. Wardick ends up getting fired or sacked, as you say, on your side of the pond. So, what's the Clinton connection and what are we talking about? So, again, the money was raised for Haiti in 2010. And the person that was the head of the international department, the person who was asking for money and who had sent an initial 25,000 euro to Haiti, ended up being the person that was the whistleblower against the Irish Red Cross. He had found that there were 162,000 euro in hidden funds that were not spent on Haiti, and that went to some bank account that he wasn't aware of. And he said it was the tip of the corruption iceberg. So now here's when it gets really creepy. The Irish Red Cross actually sued Google to force Google to disclose who was running a blog that was pointing out all of these issues with and them not actually giving the money to Haiti. And when Google capitulated, they found that the blog was Noah Wardick. And this is why he was fired by the Irish Red Cross.
Google outed him. Google doxed him.
Yeah, he got doxed.
Doxed.
We're talking about. And this is sort of an example of when we talked about that Google is watching you. They are watching, and depending on the government that they're working with, they will out you. And even if you are trying to tell the truth about something that's really very dastardly and evil, these organizations will work together. And the charity, actually, they had no problem saying that they were taking appropriate legal action to obtain the proof of the identities of the posters of the blog, and they did. So he was fired. But he's actually, to the best of my knowledge, still an active whistleblower and someone who's still about charity fraud.
And we would offer this invitation on the live stream and out here on the broadcast for Mr. Wardick to get in contact, and we'd love to interview him.
Absolutely. So now let's get into some more about the Red Cross. And I know we're coming up on time. I'm very conscious of it. 3:51. So in the next slide, we're showing you a couple of things. So we've got in 2012, right? So we were back in 2010. By fast forward to 2012, and the Irish Red Cross had to admit that their vice chairman was the person who signed for the undisclosed bank account, and that what Mr. Warwick had found was true, that they hadn't given the money, and that more than 160,000 euros in donations were going to a secret bank account.
Boom.
Boom. Boom. And then what I'm showing you here on the right-hand side is from the Ireland's National Parliament. And just in summary, the National Parliament statement says that this disgusting debacle must stop, and these individuals must not be permitted any longer to make a mockery of the Irish public, of the elected representatives, and of genuine Irish Red Cross volunteers and staff, and of our national parliament. It is high time for the International Red Cross of Geneva to come off the sidelines and prevent any further damage to and deterioration of the credibility of the Red Cross in Ireland. And it says, ultimately, Geneva, it's time to wake up and do your job. Protect the Red Cross emblem before irreparable damage is done. The 19th January 2012, a day of infamy for the Irish Red Cross.
Huge.
And that was an official statement by your government.
Exactly. Well done. Well done, Stable.
Well done, Irish Parliament. It took everybody 2 years. And that's the other thing, we're in a long game. We're in a very long game. And we need to go and we need to dig, and we can dig together. But all this stuff is out there. It just hasn't been put together in a way that, as we like to talk about it, that the normies can understand. So I really appreciate everything that you're doing, Gran Torino, by bringing so many interesting people to the table to speak to and with those in YouTube who care. And we can just start to wake up everybody slowly but surely.
100%, Stable, 100%. Keep going with your fantastic work, Chicken.
Oh, thank you. So we can actually go to the next slide and just kind of close it out. So in summary, hopefully what you learned a little bit about was Ranbaxy as an organization. you were able to see that there is an actual connection to non-governmental organizations. And I bet they're happening in your country too, even if you're not from Ireland. I shared a little bit about my decode process in the Quniverse, and we showed that there is an absolute connection to Ireland, both the people of Ireland being defrauded and defunded, as well as the people of Ireland's name being besmirched by nefarious bad actors and money launderers, and then the fact that the people of Ireland who thought that they were helping people in Africa, in fact, were killing them. So I think that there's some opportunity all around to change that, and we can just speak some truth to power. So, and if Bono is listening, or if anybody from Red Cross Ireland is listening, because these people are very vain, and I like to think that most people do things because they want to do the right thing. I don't necessarily ascribe any negative feelings, but the impact of the work, the impact is that people are not being taken care of, and that the money is being wasted. And so I just want to challenge that if you are in fact on the side of good and on the side of right, then clean all these things up. And I certainly would challenge you to come and speak to Mr. Gran Torino, and set the record straight.
Oos. My pleasure.
Yeah, so we've got about 5 minutes for questions, so I'm certainly happy to field some questions from you too.
Brilliant. Okay, live chat there. We've got like I say, we want to try and keep these snapshot shows to within an hour. I apologise for the quick 5 seconds. We wanted to get through and give it to as much detail as we could, but just to send you off in the right direction, because again, it's up to you. We'll get the snowball rolling. It's up to you to turn it into an avalanche. And I think most of the talk there from live chat. If you see any questions that's directed at you, Stable, you work away and take it away.
Okay, sure. Well, so Faux Hammer, thank you very much. He says that GT, Stable, you guys are doing a great job. I really appreciate it. James Collins, the Red Cross may be involved with the UN in human trafficking. I don't doubt it. Spot inspections for Haiti. Do the moral rights always do unto others as you would do unto yourself? That is the truth, absolutely. No way of saying watch government privatize outsource contractors. Absolutely. Again, your taxes are paying for it. And the question becomes, if the government can't do it, then maybe it doesn't need to be done. Or why do we need to pay the government to do it at all?
100%.
And Matt Coyne is saying Bono dope.
Yeah. We're going to keep it to the last few minutes. So I think I'm just going to use the last remaining few minutes to gush and to fawn over Stable Eight's genius, and I think she's lived up to her name. People, I think you have to give it to her. It was an amazing presentation. I was amazed the first time I seen it. I was amazed the second time I seen it, and I'm still amazed as I'm going through it here now with you guys. I will, as I say to you, I will push out in the description box here later on. Give me a chance just to catch up on some of the works. But when you check back in here on the videos for future reference, the link will be there. You can take it away. The presentation, once we give it a bleach bit wash to make sure that there's no connections. You understand
or
that?
A hammer.
You understand that terminology? And
bleach bit it for sure.
We'll bleach bit it today. So live chat from myself and Stable, and I'm not signing off on Stable's behalf, but I'm just reaching out to you guys. I want to thank you very much for paying attention to us and giving us an hour of your time to share this information. I'd ask you now to push that on to your nearest and dearest. Push it onto whatever platforms you have, not just for the sake of sharing it with this info because it's this platform, but push it on because of the information. Push the sauce on. Let's start waking the normies up. We're all part of a bigger and greater cause. I still believe it. I don't care what's going on. It's going to take time.
Yeah.
These things aren't going to happen overnight, but we are part of a phenomenon. And Stable, I'll leave it up to you if you want to finish out some closing words there, my love.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for having me on. It really is a tremendous honor. Thank you to all the people on YouTube. I think they were asking, where can they send me some sauce? So I am a member of the CBTS_stream. You can catch us 24 hours a day. And I know that we have, when you get to the stream, you'll see there's lots of links to ways to get involved with us on Discord. Once you get on the Discord, I am Stable Genius, or you can find me at Stable Genius on Twitter. And just, a sincere thank you, and God bless you, and prayers to all the people all over the world, to the people of Ireland and Africa and those that have been abused. And we can fix it, and we just got to do some research. So keep reading.
Great stuff. Thank you, Stable. I'd like to just drop out a few. I'd just like a few requests. I'd like to ask you to like the presentation, and not just on my behalf, but on Stable's behalf. Smash that like button. If you're new to the show, press the subscribe button. And if you want to be reminded if you get a quick notification for any future lightning blitzkrieg movements that we do, presentations, hit the little bell button, and you'll get a reminder just as I drop the link. Usually about 5 or 10 minutes before I go on. It's just that kind of busyness and that kind of strangeness going on. I'd like to thank the two moderators that were in the live chat at one stage, Q Universe and Resignation, for dropping by. Thank you all again to you, live chat, for tuning in and giving us your attention again. And we really appreciate all that you do for us. And thank you to my Patreon subscribers and all your donations coming in through cryptocurrencies and PayPal and Patreon. Much appreciated. It facilitated the upgrade on my sound check. It facilitated for new mics, new cameras, and hopefully when we go forward interviewing future leaders of Ireland, future contributors to Ireland, when, as Herman Kelly in my last interview said, let's replace our political class. That's going to be my intention, and a few other NGO facilitators on the way. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much. Last one from me. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stable, and good night, live chat.
Good night.